take notes during a pre-lab session. So quizzes and exam questions can come from this section of the lab. Take notes also during the post-lab session when your instructor is gathering together all the data and the results that you got. There might be some discussion on conclusion of your experiment, why and how and where. All those questions may be answered at that point. Again, quiz and exam questions can come from this section of the lab. Some lab exercises may have questions at the end of that chapter. So answer those questions, and if some give you more trouble than others, you can always ask your instructor what the specific answers to some of them might be. Also, your instructor might give you practice questions. Make sure you practice them before your next lab quiz comes up. I will talk a little bit about creating memory and how to help your memory to help yourself. So recopying and organizing your notes is a very important part. This is a great active study method. This is time consuming, but does two things. It gives you a chance to review what you have covered in class and make sure you didn't miss anything. It also gives you a well-organized set of notes to study for the test. Use your own words and organization. So concentrate as you make this new copy of your notes. If you can only copy over and memorize the original wording, you probably don't really understand the concept. So try and comprehend and understand as you are rewriting. Copy your notes over neatly so that they will still make sense to you when the material is not fresh, like at the test time or at the end of the semester during the final exam. Integrate lecture notes with information from textbooks, slides, and notes from your reading assignments. Try and find answers to your own questions whenever possible. Use flashcards. Some people like them, some people don't. But if you like them, use flashcards for appropriate material such as terms and diagrams and flowcharts, etc. Study independently and also with your classmates. It can often be beneficial to discuss concepts with a partner or have a classmate test your knowledge. However, it is also important to spend a certain amount of time studying and concentrating on your own. This is especially true near the test time. Another question most students will ask is how long to study? How much is enough? Study as long as it takes to understand and master, not memorize. Master the material. Your goal is to study effectively and successfully, not on a specific number of hours. The actual number of hours you spend studying will vary from your classmates, and so it varies from student to student. But you will probably need to study far more now than you ever did in high school. Ever did in high school. On average, you may spend 2 to 3 hours outside of class for each hour you spend in class. So a 50-minute lecture requires about 3 hours of studying outside class. If you study in one sitting for long hours, study 10 minutes of biology and then 10 minutes doing something completely different, such as, jumping around with your siblings or doing some Pokemon outside or, playing football. This 10 on, 10 off method actually works. But the key here is when you study, study. And when you have fun, have fun. Do not mix the two. Each of these 10 minutes has to be intense. So what I'm saying is, do not study for more than 10 minutes or 15 minutes at the tops in one sitting, in one stretch. Next thing I'll talk about is how to achieve success in a biology course. Studying, remember, is an active, not passive process. So participate. Do not be a spectator in a class. Keep a pen in your hands at all times and use that pen. Focus on the words that are written in bold on the slides. Write terms and concepts, especially if they're new terms and new concepts, over and over in your own words. Don't just look at your notes. If instructor explains something and spends time explaining something, on the board for a length of time, then that must be important. Expect it to show up on tests. Read your assignments actively also. So when you're reading an assignment, preview the material and read with objectives in mind. Write the keywords or underline the key terms on the questions and concepts and your own questions in the margin. Don't just highlight entire pages of text. Use every sense you have that is possible to be used. Examine and reproduce charts and figures. Repeat concepts and terms aloud. So hearing yourself is very important also. Remember, one time is no time at all. So if you're saying you studied it once and you came to a test, that is not studying it at all. Study difficult materials over and over again. Test yourself realistically. Can you actually reproduce key figures and flowcharts on your own? Really? Can you explain a process to a classmate in your own words and that person understands? Are your self-tests realistic? For example, can you only explain mitosis to a classmate if you just looked at the notes yourself 2 minutes ago? Not possible, right? The great power lies in your classmates that you may not have tapped into yet. The study group power. So find a study group. This technique doesn't work for everyone, especially, there are some introverts and loners in our life. They probably don't like to talk at all and get involved with the group. But this technique seems to work for many, many students. It is very effective. Talk through the subject matter and make sure everyone understands what you're saying. If they're not understanding what you're saying, then when you're writing it to your instructor, they cannot understand it either. Quiz each other. This is a great resource to make sure that you are not misunderstanding concepts. Next thing I'll talk about is are strategies for memory-based. The strategies below are particularly useful for classes or topics that have a lot of vocabulary names. Number 1, you can use flashcard, their old favorite, but write very little on it. Too much is not needed here. Some people even cut it in a half. Photocopy pictures, like I have said before, and make copies of them and practice writing on them. You can hang them on a wall, and every time you pass by, add a label to it. Or get a coloring book, which is also good. There are coloring books available for all sorts of biology topics. Very good resource. But again, use only a little at a time, 1 page at a time. And then the other thing is to look for online quizzes that are available. You can Google topics like, say, test or exam on cell, test or exam on the skull, or test on human body parts, or things like that. Next thing I'll talk about is how to study for concept-based tests. So not all tests will test your memory. Many of them will test your analytical abilities. The strategies below work best for classes and topics that discuss processes. So the following is a method to help you learn difficult processes. For example, if you have to learn all the steps of aerobic respiration, how are you going to learn it? When you are comfortable with one of these steps, only then move on to the next level of difficulty. So they're arranged by levels of difficulty. A. Draw, trace, or photocopy a picture of the process from your book. Before that, of course, you have to remove the label. Write the vocabulary words that relate to the process on another sheet of paper. Be able to put the right term in the right place on the picture. When you've mastered that, move to B. Now try to label the picture without the terms in front of you. Next, C. Now look for the list of vocabulary words. Put the words in order and draw the picture. Color code the different steps of the process. Next, now take a blank sheet of paper and draw the picture from scratch without any words in front of you. Label the picture you've drawn. If you've reached this far, you're kind of sort of ready for your exam now. But if you want to really ace the exam, then go to the next step. E. Take a blank sheet of paper and draw the process backwards. Hey, why not? Next, do the above process, but instead of drawing a picture, now write a paragraph explaining the process. You can also take all the parts of the process and put them on note cards. Now use the note cards to explain the process. Or you can buy Play-Doh and build a model for the process. This works more for like high school level. I wouldn't really recommend this last step for college. But if you are deep in trouble and deep in doo-doo, you might try Play-Doh. It doesn't really matter how you use the Play-Doh, but you need to take the process and break it down into smaller parts that you can understand and put together. So some people like to do transcription, translation, and DNA replication with Play-Doh if you have not understood the basic concept. After you've done number 1 and number 2, number 3 then, explain what you learned in class to your roommate or family member or classmate. Ask them if they understood what you just explained. Pretend you're the instructor. How would you present the information to somebody you are teaching this to? Teaching another person is a great tool to learn things ourselves. You may lose a few friends this way, but you will get a better grade. Now choose what are your priorities. Also try explaining the process out loud to yourself. Hearing it often makes us remember things better. Explain the process to a classmate and ask them for feedback for sure. There are many other good study strategies out there. You can talk to your classmates and see if there's a strategy they use. You can talk to your teachers. Each of them might have different ideas. Of course, mine are on this PowerPoint, but your other teachers might have different ideas that are excellent also. Now, what to do if it feels like you are drowning? Here are the top 5 study techniques. Number 1, learn the terminology. One of the hardest parts of studying biology is remembering the many, many different terms. If you want to understand what you're studying, then you need to familiarize yourself with all these terms first. A good method for this is to try and break down the complex words into their identity, their identifying their root words. Especially if these words happen to be in Latin or Greek, which many of the scientific words are. It is highly recommended that whenever you encounter unfamiliar words while studying biology, you should take a note of them. Don't just say, that means nothing to me, and move on. Find that word's definition and then take the time to understand the root words. Number 2, from the general to the specific. To follow a process of effective learning in biology, you must master the general concepts before being able to tackle specific ones. For example, you need to understand what factors identify a mammal before stating or starting on the factors that identify primates. Okay? In the same way, you need to know what a cell is and what its organelles do before you start tackling, let's say, mitochondria and what specific things it does. So, from general to specific. So in this sense, it is also advisable to study the process thoroughly before advancing to the next level. To speed up memorization of different processes and their relationship, mind maps are effective educational resources for students. So look up mind maps and you'll find some really eye-opening information. And these mind maps help organize information in a very easy and visual way. Number 3, embrace the lab. Put biology theory into practice by using the lab whenever possible to explore your curiosity. Once in the lab, you can test your hypothesis, you whether you support or disprove your hypothesis. In terms of learning, the act of doing this hands-on will stay with you a lot longer than the act of reading